Sure. I'm Leslie Chicoine, and I'm from GetSatisfaction.com. Wow, this weekend's been really interesting. I think I might be the only designer. No, I think there's probably 2 or 3 designers who are here, and so that's been a really interesting perspective. Actually understanding what's going on in the technology is important, but the translation process is maybe more important. So from this I've kind of taken away that there's a lot of misunderstanding about what audience is being spoken to. So I feel like a lot of what I've seen this week is confusion between large consumers like a company and individual users. So I think that's kind of interesting. It actually makes me think that maybe as designers we need to be better about finding ways to educate the development community about user behavior and people's behaviors online. So that would be kind of an interesting project. For example, actually having the OpenID emblem and branding it that way is strange for users. They don't really need to know what's going on. Like, OpenID will be successful when nobody knows what it is and that behavior just exists. So actually trying to market it and explain the concept to end users is not really productive. So, but at the same time they bring up a lot of really important issues, so it's good that they're talking about these people who are going to be using this service, because those people do need to understand what power they have over their information. So I actually got a chance to talk a little bit about how my company GetSatisfaction has implemented HGuard, and a few of the things that we find very important are exposing what data is being sent. So actually just filling out the form of information, not just automatically sending it, explaining to people what's happening in like clear, plain text, and making sure that it's very centered on them and not centered on the service or the technology that's being used. So I'd actually like on our site, we don't really mention HGuard, and then when we actually start implementing OAuth and OpenID, I don't want us to use those words. Again, it should work and people should just see the magic. Another one is gradients of information, because there's a lot of information being passed through these services, which is part of the power, but it's also a bit confusing for people, and there's management involved that they don't really want to deal with. So if we can also start looking at ways of saying, you know, here's the 2 pieces of information, so your photo and your username, that you kind of have to pass on, and here's all the other stuff that, you know, if you want to use this facet of your personality in this other site, here it all is. You can edit it, change it right here, so you do management in process. You don't have like a management page somewhere else. You just decide what information is passed on to the next service. And I feel like a lot of that is very easy to design into an interface and not really part of the technical challenge, but ends up being the part that makes it, that will give it adoption or won't. Well, one thing that's really interesting is seeing this process of developers getting together and trying to create standards. The browser standards, there was a huge community around that, and you can tell that they learned a lot from that experience. They learned that there's the danger of being seen as a hype machine. There's the possibility of being taken more seriously as a group or a foundation versus just individuals. And so seeing this group of people try to hash out the balance between those 2 extremes was pretty fascinating. Another thing that's really great is just this constant emergence of the idea of game design in social systems. And it was interesting that that was so closely linked to what was happening here, because I had not expected to get the chance to talk about that, because my understanding was it was going to be about data portability and about the social graph. And I haven't heard that much talk of game design principles and gameplay in social systems. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that that's also part of it, because again, if there's management involved, I think that might be part of why it gets mentioned. We want to figure out how to make that fun and interesting. And also, game design is one of the few fields that knows how to deal with complex social systems. So trying to take lessons from how they deal with it and how they make it easier for people to understand what repercussions there are and what benefits there are, and keep them entertained and engaged.